So I'm trying to get it in focus. It's not wanting to focus in for some reason. Let me try wiping it off with a wipe here. Bear with me. Just trying to get it to work maybe. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this to focus in. For some reason, it's having trouble. Come on. All right, well, it's just going to have to be blurry, I guess. Sorry about that, everybody. But just glad to be here. We got the hurricane coming through. My guess, it's supposed to be the worst tomorrow. It's not too bad right now. It's just kind of raining right now. It's been raining all day, but I think tomorrow or in starting tonight, it's going to start to get more windy. So it might lose power and stuff like that. So just a heads up, if that happens, we won't have office hours tomorrow. And it's going to drive me nuts. Let me try to get it to focus in a little bit. And, well, hopefully y'all can hear me all right. We'll answer questions. Just going to have to bear with it being a little bit blurry. So sorry about that, everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. We will start here. Looks like we got a question from RD. It says, what is the difference in shoulder tilt in the backswing versus impact position? Not much. You're only typically going to be tilted down a little bit more, right? So in the backswing, we're going to typically be here. And the downswing is typically just going to be a little bit steeper. That's what we see in the best players. If you can get it to be pretty close to the same, right, then you're going to be in good shape. Generally, if we're looking at, I take my PVC pipe here, and I put it across. There, focused in. I take my PVC pipe here, and I put it across my shoulders. And let's say that I'm set up to hit this golf ball here. All right, so if I'm set up to hit this golf ball, in the backswing, I'm typically going to have my shoulder tilt be somewhere, if you extended this all the way to the ground, it'd be somewhere 4 to 8 feet on the other side of my golf ball. And then in the downswing, it's typically going to be more like, 4 feet. It's going to be a little bit steeper as you're coming through. But if you can get it to be pretty close to the same, then you'll be in good shape there. The better ball strikers, when we see tour players, it's typically a little bit steeper with the shoulder tilt in the downswing. The main thing is that the tilt, the plane is the same. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to go here and then like that, right? I want it to be kind of on a very similar plane throughout, right? That's where I see a lot of people struggle with the swing plane or the shoulder plane. Is if you imagine if I'm like this, let's say I'm doing the airplane drill. So airplane drill where we take our arms and we put them out like this, right? What I'll see is we'll get here, we'll be in good shape, but then this hand just kind of drops underneath and we kind of go like this, right? That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is we want to get here, and I almost want to replace this hand with this hand, right? So it'd be kind of like that, and then come up and through, right? All right, so we got it working better. All right, so we got another question here from Scott W. Says, in the backswing, you want left side tilt, so shoulders should rotate under, but in setup, you want to start with right side tilt. This is a little confusing. Yeah, so basically in your swing, you're kind of going like this, right? This is kind of what you're doing in the swing. So I address, we're not really, so what's happening is we're tilting our whole body, right? So our whole body is getting like this. It's not like we're going like this, right? Our whole body, so our hips bump a little bit forward and our upper body bumps a little bit back. So there's not a lot of right side bend. It's mostly just our body is tilted. And then when we go up to the top, there's going to be some left side bend. And then the downswing, there's going to be some right side bend, right? So the way I would think of it is your whole body is tilting, and then at address, and then when you go up to the top, you get left side bend, right? So when we go up to the top, we're going to get left side bend, and then when we come down to contact, we're going to have right side bend. So basically, we're like this, and then we go up to the top, then we come through impact, then we go into the finish, right? That's the way that it works. We wouldn't want to start with left side bend to start, right? Because what would end up happening, imagine if you set up like this. Well, I'm going to have a hard time I'm going to have to kind of set up with my left arm shorter, right? Because my right hand's lower on the grip, right? And when I go back, I may be able to go back like this, but I'm going to tend to lean toward the target and be in bad position. So the whole body is tilted, right? So my hips and my spine. So my spine is going to be relatively straight. There's not going to be a ton of curve in it. Might be a small amount, but I'm going to be tilting my whole body like this. And then when I go up to the top, my spine is going to curve from the left side bend. And then as I go into transition, I'm going to start to straighten that out and then go into right side bend down in the downswing. Good question, though. I can see how that can be confusing for sure. It's like, why do we have to do all these side bends? It's mainly so that we can stay stable with our body, right? So if I didn't do any left side bend, right, then my shoulder would just come back super level, right? I need to get the side bend to have my shoulders rotate on a good plane, right? Because otherwise, if my shoulders come back level, right, then I'm going to tend to pull down on it instead of swinging around my body. So Tom M says, I've read that at impact, you should have the sensation of throwing a ball underhanded, similar to what you would do if you were trying to skip stone on water. Can you explain? When I try this, I tend to hook the ball. Yeah, so that's essentially what you're doing, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're throwing this club head underhand, into the golf ball, right? So if you imagine if I'm skipping a stone across the water, if we imagine this golf ball is a stone, right? I'm going to bring it back here. I'm going to lead with my elbow. I'm going to tilt my shoulders down. I'm going to rotate my body open, and then I'm going to release it out in front. That's the same thing we want to do with the golf club. I want to get it up here. If we're just kind of isolating my trail arm, I want to get it up here. And then I'm going to start rotating my body. My right elbow is going to lead. That's going to help me to shallow out the club. If you look from this angle, it's shallowing out, right? And then I'm going to throw it into the back of the ball and then release it out in front. So that feeling may get you to hook the ball, but what I would look at is, are you actually doing that movement, right? Because my guess is that you're probably just early releasing the club. That feeling may be, you may be kind of feeling like throwing a ball, but the reality might be that you're kind of throwing it straight into the ground. So if I have the sensation that I'm throwing something straight into the ground, then it'll look like this, right? If I had a ball here and I just wanted to spike it into the ground, it would look like that, right? So if I do that with a club, it would look like this, right? And when I early release the club, that's going to close the face. When you close the face too much, you'll tend to get hooks. So if I had to guess, that's probably what's going on. So I would look on video and see, okay, am I releasing this club out in front like I would if I were skipping a rock across the water? Or if I was skipping a stone, I'd be releasing that out in front. Are you doing that with the golf club? And it sounds like you're probably not. It's hard to say without seeing for sure, but it sounds like you're probably kind of spiking the ball into the water or spiking the ball into the ground, and then that's what's leading to close the closed club face. It's really, really important when you're trying to change movements in your swing to kind of video what's going on, because feel isn't always real, right? You may feel like you're doing something, but the reality is usually that you're not, right? So if you look on video, you'll be able to clearly see, okay, I may feel like I'm doing this, but this is what I'm actually doing, and then you can adjust it. You may need to exaggerate it to get into the position that you're wanting to get into. All right, let's keep going. If we got some more questions. So Scott W says, how far down on or up the grip should my hands be? My hands are long relative to my body, so I feel like I'm gripping down on the shaft. Is it correct to set up the club at its lie angle so the sole is flat and then grip the club? All right, so some good questions there. So as far as where you should situate your hands on the grip, I would look at your lead hand. And really, what we want to do, if you're wanting to use the full length of the club, right, what you want to do is just situate it to where the butt end of the club is clear of your hand here. What we wouldn't want to do is have it to where this is like that, where the end of the club, the butt end of the club, the edge is on your hand, because that will just wear out your hand. And or if you wear gloves, which most people do, that's you're just going to wear a spot in there because that edge is just digging into it, right? So we want to have it to where it's just over it, where we're not getting that rubbing on there. And then you just place your trail hand on there. Now, if you have large hands, it may have your hands way down here, right? I don't have super huge hands. I think I have probably average size hands. So that's where my hands end up here on the grip. The other thing to consider is you want to make sure that your hands, if you have a 10-finger grip, a grip that's like this, where we're not interlocking or overlapping the fingers here, then your hands may go down farther on the grip. What you want to make sure of, though, is if you're having a 10-finger grip, that your hands aren't really far apart. Have those hands nice and snug together when you're doing that. Now, as far as the lie angle of the club at address, generally the toe is going to be up a little bit, usually, because here would be like your address position when you're letting your arms kind of hang straight down, right? That's going to allow you to be in a relaxed position. Now, you can set up with the lie angle of the club flat on the ground like this, but you can see how I have to kind of raise the handle and I have to straighten out my arms, right? And that can introduce some tension into the swing, right? Some tension into the arms, which, I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't hit good golf shots from there, but you may find that you are better from a more relaxed, let your arms kind of hang down. If I let my arms hang straight down, that's going to put the toe of the club up in the air a little bit. And then when I come to contact, because of the velocity of the club, the speed of the club, the forces that are going on here, that's going to basically create a straight line between the shaft and my lead arm here. That's typically what's going to happen. So you're going to end up like that. The shaft's going to get higher, and that's what's going to get the club flush to the ground. What matters is how the club works through impact, right? So when you set up, you just want to set up in any way, in whatever way that allows the club to work through impact the best, right? For most people, it's going to be relaxing the arms, letting them hang straight down. If they hang straight down, then there's going to be an angle created here, right? And then that's going to get the handle a little bit lower, and that's going to get the heel on the ground a little bit and the toe a little bit up. And then when we come to impact, right, because we're coming in and this is going to be more of a straight line, that's going to get the handle a little bit higher, and that's going to get it flush with the ground. But if you set up with it flush to the ground, and then that helps you to get it flush to the ground at impact, nothing wrong with that either. If that allows you to make hit a better shot, then go for it. So Charlie G says, please compare hitting from a fairway bunker versus from fairway, i.e., what do you do differently? The pro seems to make a nice divot in the sand, which makes me think the swing is the same on both situations. You're exactly right. There really isn't much difference between what you do with a fairway bunker shot versus hitting out of the fairway. We still want to make ball first contact, right? The thing is, hitting out of a fairway bunker shot, hitting out of a bunker, excuse me, the degree of difficulty is higher. There's a lot less margin for error. So, if you hit an inch behind the golf ball in the bunker, it's usually going to end up kind of being a chunk shot, right? If you hit an inch behind the ball out of the fairway, depending on the lie, right? If the ball's kind of sitting up a little bit, if you have a nice cushy fairway, it may not. You're still chunking it, but it may not be as big of a deal. You may just leave it a little bit short. It might go 5-10 yards short, right? And it also depends on how you're coming down into impact. If you're coming in shallow or if you're coming down steeply. But either way, if you hit any sand before the golf ball of the bunker, it's typically gonna be worse off. It's typically going to end up being a chunk shot because that club just wants to dig into the sand, right? And you're swinging with too much speed, and you have to hit the ball far enough that you can't use the bounce of the club to really keep you from doing that. So that's really what it comes down to. Now, that being said, there's a higher there's a higher importance to make sure that you get ball first contact. So what you can do is make some adjustments to ensure that you make ball first contact more consistently. So what you may want to do is use extra club, maybe choke up on the club to give you a little bit more control of it. Maybe take a little bit of a shorter swing to give you a little bit more control of it. Maybe feel like you're keeping your weight on your lead side, right, with that shorter swing, because we don't want to swing really hard out of a fairway bunker because it's a less stable surface, right? So, maybe taking a shorter swing gives you a little bit more stability. So taking some extra club, shorter swing, choke up, weight forward, really putting an emphasis on there. You can also put the ball slightly more back in the stance. Generally, for a normal shot, you would have the ball position a little bit forward of the middle. You may put it, more in the middle of the stance to help you make more ball first contact. Those are all adjustments that you can make. But if you're like a tour player, right, and you're very highly skilled, you're going to be able to make ball first contact. There really isn't much adjustments that you have to make hitting out of a fairway bunker. It's really, you just have to be more precise with what you're doing. All right, let's keep going. So Scott W says, thanks, great explanation. No problem, Scott. Glad to help. Tom M says, what determines if you have a fly or lie? So what a fly or lie is basically where the ball is sitting up on the grass that would make you tend to hit it a little bit higher on the face. If we get the ball a little bit higher on the face, it will typically go a little bit farther because it won't spin as much, right? And you'll also get a little bit of grass. So typically get a little bit of grass getting between the face and the ball, which will also make it slip and not spin as much, right? So if we get a little higher face, higher launch, lower spin, the ball's going to go a little bit farther, right? That's what's going to turn that. So usually when that happens, it's like if you're in the rough, maybe it's kind of like an intermediate rough, or maybe you have fairways that are kind of maybe a little bit longer, like kind of really sit the ball up. If you're in a situation like that and the ball is just sitting on top of the grass, that's what you would call a fly or lie, because you can come in, hit a little bit, behind the ball, but hitting behind the ball a little bit gets that strike a little bit higher on the face, more like dead center in the face. And then you get that grass in between there, high launch, low spin, ball will typically go a little bit farther when you do that. So that's what they call a flyer. So John G says, I tend to pull my full swing, trying to figure out if I'm shallowing the club enough. Would a launch monitor angle of attack measurement answer that? Is the shallowing course directly related to angle of attack? If my angle of attack is okay, should I work on face angle more than swing path? All right, so all good question there. I think there's a little bit which is very confusing when we talk about shallowing in the golf swing. There's lots of areas of the swing that you can talk about shallowing. When we're talking about the shallowing course, what we're talking about there is how the club is shallowing out in the downswing. So is this club flattening out as we're coming down? When we're talking about shallow angle of attack, that's different. That's where the club is coming in more level versus more down on the ball. Now, generally, if you are coming down steep in the downswing, you continue to come down steep, you will also have a steep angle of attack, generally, but not always, but generally you will. And if you're someone who's really shallowing out the club and you're keeping it shallow all the way down, then you'll generally have a shallower angle of attack. Not always, because the ball position can make a difference there, right? So if I have the ball way back in my stance like this, right, and I come in really, really shallow, but since it's back in my stance, I'm actually coming down steep with a steep angle of attack, right? So I know it's all confusing, but what, just to answer your first question, right? You said you're not sure if you're shallowing out the club enough, because but you're pulling shots, right? You're pulling shots. Well, If you're pulling shots, your ball flight's telling you are not shallowing out the club, right? And just to clarify here, a pull, what I would call a pull for a right-handed golfer would be a ball that starts left and then just goes straight left. Doesn't have a lot of curvature to it. It's just a straight left shot. So what's happening when you hit a straight left shot is your club path, your club's coming down steep, right? And that's going to make your club path work out to in. And then your club face is also in that same direction that your path is moving, and that's going to lead to a pulled shot, right? So what we want to do is get the club shallowing out, so that way we can swing from the inside, swing into out, and then that's going to help you to be able to draw the ball. So what I would recommend doing is working through our 20-minute shallowing fix course, and first get the ball to hook, right? That's telling you that you're getting the face closed. And the reason why that's important is that we have to have the face closed in order to be able to incentivize to shallow it out. See, if the face is square or the face is open, we don't have any incentive to shallow it out because we're just going to hit it right and right, right? If you're a right-handed golfer, you're either going to push it to the right or you're going to hit a big push slice, right? So we have to get the face closed first. So that's drill number one. Now, if you're pulling the ball, it's probably going to be pretty easy just to get the ball to hook, right? Get the face closed. We hit 10 shots in a row that hook. Doesn't matter where they start. It only matters that it hooks, right? Once we're able to do that, then we work into the shallowing. This is where we get the ball to start to the right and then hook, right? This is where it matters. So if we're able to get the ball to start to the right and hook, we know that we're shallowing it at that point, right? And your angle of attack isn't in the equation here, right? And we're not worried about the angle of attack. We're only worried about the ball starting to the right and curving to the left. Now, if you want to use a launch monitor, you'd be looking at your face and path data. That's what you'd be looking at, right? So for drill number one, if you're using a launch monitor, right, you'd want the face to be closed to the path. So your face to path relationship would be negative, right? It would be closed, right? It would be closed. That would make the ball hook, right? And then once you get the ball to hook, then you're looking at, okay, I still want my face to path relationship to be closed, but now I need my club path to be to the right, right? Once you're able to get that, then you're ready for the third one where you're basically dialing those in. You overdo it in the first two drills to get to where you can do it. You exaggerate it, and then in the last drill, that's where you dial it in. You find your stock shot. So I wouldn't be worrying about angle of attack. That's not really the issue here with pulls. The issue is that your face angle, right, is not closed enough. And then because it's not closed enough, you're not able to shallow it. And then you need to go shallow it. So that's what I'd recommend. Work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. Work through those drills. Your ball flight's going to tell you if you're shallowing it or not. You don't need a launch monitor, but if you're using one, what you'd be wanting to look at is your club path and facing. And it may be, if you're using a launch monitor, it may be good to work with a professional to know what exactly you're seeing with the numbers. If you're not experienced with using those and knowing what all the numbers mean, then it may be good to do that. Now, if you want, just as a bonus here, if you want to learn ball flight laws, you want to learn what all those numbers on the launch monitor mean, and what it means for what your club is doing and things like that, I'd highly recommend checking out TrackMan University. That's what it's called. It's a free online educational program. I believe it's 100% free. At least it was several years ago when I was checking it out. I believe that it still exists. So just go online and search TrackMan University, and you'll find it, and they will tell you what all the numbers mean. Right, you'll learn exactly what they all mean, and there's a lot of other stuff in there. It's really well put together. So check it out if you want to learn about that. But like I said, you don't need a launch monitor to tell you that. Your ball flight will tell you it. Jack Nicklaus, and Byron Nelson and Ben, Hogan, all these guys, they didn't have launch monitors, and they did just fine. They did what the ball flight told them, right? The ball flight told them what was happening and what they needed to do, right? And they were well educated in their own right to know, okay, if my ball flight's doing this, then this is what's happening in my swing, and this is the change that I need to make. So keep it simple, I would recommend just not using a launch monitor because it's just not necessary. But if you're in a situation you have to do this indoors, something like that, you do have to use a launch monitor. But your ball flight on the launch monitor, it will tell you what's happening. So I just pay attention to that. So Scott W says, is a good reference to indicate you are shallowing the club to look at video and see if the club shaft is lined up with the trail arm on downswing, or is there some other checkpoints that indicate the club is shallowing enough? So that's a good question. So as I mentioned, your ball flight's going to tell you, right? If you're pulling the ball, you're not shallowing out the club, right? So basically, if your ball has too much curve on it, if it's curving too much, that's a face angle issue. Your face is too closed or too open to the path of the club. If you don't have a lot of curvature on the ball and it's just a pull, right, or a big push, right, then that's a path. We need to get the path in order. Your face is lined up with your path. We need to get the path in a good position, right? And sometimes we need, if you're struggling with shallowing out the club, sometimes we need to get the club face closed, like I talked about with John there. We need to get the club face closed to be incentivized to swing the club from the inside, and then we tone it back down, right? So your ball flight's really going to be the indication. If you're pulling it, the ball's going left, or you're slicing it, right? So if you're pulling it, pull hooking it, or slicing it, that's an indication that you're coming down steep, right? Now, you could be coming down steep and then shallowing it late as well. So that's when it would be beneficial to look on video. So what I would mean there is what I see a lot of times with players is we'll come down steep in the beginning, but then we'll early extend, right? The hips will go forward, the upper body will come up, but look what happens when I do that. When I do that, now the club is shallowing out, but it's shallowing out late. And sometimes it can get to where it's too shallow and you get the snap hooks and things like that. So that's where you would want to look on video to see kind of what's going on there. So what I like to use is something called the elbow plane line. Now, it's not an exact science, but it's pretty good, especially, for shots that we're playing more toward the middle of our stance. Because really what it's showing us is swing direction, right? You can think of swing direction as kind of how your swing is moving on a hula hoop, right? So if, our club comes down, it's working to the right, to the right, to the right, it turns a corner, then it turns left, right? So if my swing direction is toward the target, right, right at the target. So basically, if I were to set this upright and roll this, it would go straight toward the target, right? Now we have it on a tilt. Right, if that ball's in the middle of my stance, that's going to be a very neutral swing path, right? And that's going to be nice and shallow. So if I have the ball a little bit more forward in my stance, the more I need to tilt this or move this to the right in order for it not to be moving to the left by the time it gets the ball. So that's why with the driver, we actually need to shallow out the club more with the driver because the ball position is more forward, right? Because the club's going to want to tend to work more to the left. So what I like to do is use the elbow plane line because it gives us an idea of the swing direction, which is a good indication of whether you're shallowing it or not. So in order to see that accurately, what you want to do is basically have the camera lined up down the toe line, right? What I see a lot of people do is they line up the camera down the ball line, and that's not going to give you an accurate representation of whether you're shallowing it or not. So make sure that you're setting up the camera down the toe line. The easiest way to do that would be to just take an alignment stick, place it on the ground, point it out toward a target, right? And then when you get your camera, your phone or whatever you're wanting to use, you just line this up directly to be going down this alignment stick, right? And then when you go to set up the ball, you just set up to the ball with your feet really close to that. So you want to make sure that this alignment stick is straight up and down on the screen, vertical on the screen. If it's like this, right? If it's like that, it's kind of skewed this way, that's not going to be correct, right? We have it like this, that's not going to be correct, right? We want it to be straight up and down. So let's see if I can get it to be pretty much straight up and down. So yeah, that's pretty much straight up and down right there. That's pretty dang close, right? So now, and I want to be at about waist level, and I want to be far away enough to where me and the club don't leave the frame. So this camera angle is too high. This is about, about this high, this camera angle is. And it's not far away enough, but this is going to give you kind of an idea of what we want, right? So now we're setting up. We have it down our toe line. We're waist level. We're far away enough to where me and the club don't leave the frame. Technically this would be too close, right? So now when I go to set the ball, I'm going to have my feet within about a club head width of the ball. And then what I want to do is I want to draw a line from the hosel of the club up through my elbow. And that's going to give us a good idea of the swing direction. And ideally what I'd want to see is I'd want to see that club working just underneath that line. So if I had that line going right through here, I'd want to see that club working just underneath that all the way down into the golf ball. If I'm seeing that, then that means I'm shallowing. If my club is working above that line, that's steep, right? And that would indicate a swing direction that's to the left, and that would indicate lots of pulled shots and pull hooks and things like that coming down steep, right? So we'd want to work on getting the club to work more from the inside from there. So Scott W says, good camera alignment tip. Thanks. No problem. Yeah, it's really, really important to do that, especially if you're doing online lessons. Really, really important to get that camera angle correct because, if you're doing online lessons, the instructor has to be able to evaluate what's going on. If the camera angle isn't correct, then, it makes it really difficult to evaluate, what's going on there. So you always want to make sure that that's correct. So that way your instructor can see that. Speaking of which, I do have online lesson spots available. I believe I have one left. So if you're interested, let me double check, see if nobody grabbed it. Yes, I do have one left. I'll put a link. I'll put a link in the chat here if anybody would like to sign up. Bear with me here, I'm trying to find the right. There we go. All right, sorry, just trying to find the link for you guys. All right, so there's the link. I just put it in the chat if you guys want to go check it out. If you have any questions about online lessons, I'll be happy to answer them on here as well. All right, let's keep going. So Dennis N says, Q, I'm left-handed with my irons. I've been blocking them to the left 10 to 15 yards of the target. Sometimes it feels like I'm getting in front of the ball. Other times I feel like I'm coming from the inside too much. It could be, well, one, we just need to get the face a little bit more closed. So working through drill number 1 of the 20-minute shallowing fix can help you to get the ball, get the face a little bit more closed. And then, if you get the ball, starting to, get the ball hooking, right? Then work through drill number 2, which is going to be pretty easy since you're already swinging from the inside because you're blocking it. And then drill number 3 will help you dial that in, help you get to where you're shallowing out a little bit less, right? So that's what I would recommend doing. Get the face more closed. The easiest way to get the club face more closed would be to either strengthen the grip, right? Get the grip a little bit stronger. That usually just does the trick. But if you're not comfortable with that, you really don't like that, the other option is to change your wrist angles, get stronger wrist angles. So bowing that lead wrist and extending back that trail wrist. If I do that, you can see how that closes the face. Because you may have this club swinging from the inside, right? And bear with me, I know you're left-handed, but I'm right-handed, so I don't have a way to demonstrate it left-handed. But basically, if I'm coming down, I'm swinging from the inside and that face is open, and then I come into contact and my face is open, right? I'm just going to hit a block that kind of goes off to the right. So what I want to do is I want to have this face a little bit more closed, a little bit more matching my back line. So you can see here, that's my back line. I want to have this club face more matching my back line as I'm coming in, and that's going to allow you to get it to turn over. So work through that drill number 1 of the 20-minute shallowing fix, and that may do the trick all on its own. But if you find that you have too much curve on it, then you're going to easily work through drill number 2 and then work through drill number 3 to get that dialed in. So to get to the 20-minute shadowing fix, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shadowing fix, and get started on those drills. So John G says, confused about the squat move in the downswing. Are you actually bending from the hips to get your chest closer to the ball, or are you keeping the hip spine angle constant and lowering your body through the knees? Yeah, you're pushing. There's some knee bend. There's definitely some increased knee bend, some knee flex, but there's also hip and chest movement as well. So you can kind of think of it as almost like an accordion, right? So what's happening here, what I see a lot of golfers do is when we get here, the legs start straightening out and the hips kind of move forward, right? So if I go up to the top of the swing and I just start doing that to start, you can see how that moves my body further away from the golf ball right away. And now I have to kind of flip to get to the golf ball, right? I can't get shaft lean. I have to early release to get to the ball, because if I got a lot of shaft lean here, the club wouldn't be down to the ball. It'd be way above the ball, right? And nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to get shaft lean and miss the ball. Everyone's going to flip the club to get it to the golf ball, right? So what we want to do is we want to be here, right? And then when we start the downswing, we're going to add some flex to the knees. And we're going to add some bend to the waist as we're starting down, right? So we're going to be here. And then basically by the time my lead arm is parallel in the downswing, I want to have my knees back to square. My knees are going to be at their maximum flex. My hips are going to be pretty close to back to square, right? And then from there, that's when everything's going to start to straighten out. That's when my lead leg is going to start to straighten out. That's when I'm going to start extending a little bit through the ball. But we want to be extending toward the target, right? Not at the golf ball, but toward the target. So I'm going to be here, and then I'm going to start extending my hips toward the target, right? That's the feeling that I want to have. So it's almost like, we talked earlier about throwing a ball, right? I'm going to bend my hips back, and then I'm going to extend toward the target as I'm throwing through. What we don't want to do, what you described, right, is where we just go here, right, and then it's just this, right, where the knees just bend, right? The knees bend, the hips bend back, and the chest moves down. All those things happen. So RD says, when putting, sorry about that. What are the two of the most common tendencies you see recreational golfers do wrong? It's a good question. It's usually setup stuff. It's almost always setup stuff. So typically what I'll see is golfers won't line their eyes up in a way that allows them to see straight, right? They'll be lined up too far over the ball or too far back, too far in front. The ball position setup, it's almost always setup stuff. Most golfers I see actually have a pretty good stroke. It's not really a stroke issue usually. It's more of a it's usually more of a setup issue that doesn't allow the club. Typically, it doesn't allow the club to work the way it needs to through contact. So that'd be, kind of number one, is really just setup issues. That's really, and that's 1 and 2 really is setup issues. I tell you what, whenever I work with golfers in online lessons, usually I can't even remember a time where, we didn't make setup changes and it didn't improve putting, right? Because your setup needs to put you in a position to be able to, with putting, I would say setup's probably the most important thing, right? Getting over the ball and knowing, okay, where, seeing straight, right? Seeing what straight is, and then setting up in a way that allows you to make a good stroke, right? Because if I set up too close to it, not only am I not going to be able to see straight, and this is generally what I see people do, is just people sometimes too close to it. But a lot of times my stroke goes this way, right? I have a good stroke, but the problem is it moves in the wrong direction. So if I move a little bit farther away from it, now I can go inside to inside, which is what I want, right? So I would say that those are kind of the main things, just setup issues, where the eyes are over the ball, and things like that. It's the typical things that I see. Now, if you're interested in working on your putting, we actually have an awesome program, the Tosby Golf Putting System, that we put together several years ago to help you with your putting. So if you want to check it out, click the house icon. That will take you to the homepage. Then scroll down the homepage. You'll see a list of all the courses there, and then you can you can work on the on your putting. All right, so let's keep going. So Dan L says, in Clay's tennis video, Snap the Cap, he talks about putting a lot of spin on the ball and having it dive into the court. How do we snap the cap in golf and avoid having the ball dive into the fairway? So I'm not a tennis guy, so I don't. I mean, I played some tennis very novicely and recreationally. Usually getting my butt whooped by my buddy, but as far as I assume what he's talking about is putting top spin on the ball, which is not something we would want to do in golf, right? And we can't really do that in golf. All we can do is kind of reduce backspin. So if you're getting the ball that's kind of diving on you, you're probably putting hook spin on it, right? So you probably need to get to hit up on the ball with less loft, right? That's really going to help you to reduce the spin, right? So for a driver, what we'd want to do is have the ball more forward, have it teed up higher, wider stance, and then make sure that we're staying behind it as we're coming through and hitting up on it. That's generally going to help you to get it up in the air, get it to launch higher, lower spin, and be able to hit the ball farther. That's what I would recommend doing. So Tom N says, you have immense knowledge, but I am curious, when you are playing, what is your personal weakness or tendency, or the thing most difficult to do consistently? So for me, right now, I would say for me, my miss is just kind of overdrawing the ball. So with irons, I tend to overdraw the ball. I like to hit a draw. That's what feels the best to me, and usually have the best results with that. But sometimes I can get to where I'm overdrawing it. So really, what I'm thinking about is kind of my window, right? So that's one thing that I think about a lot is the window that I want the ball to come out of, right? So if I'm overdrawing it, that means that the face is too closed, which means that for me as a right-handed golfer, this ball is going too far left of my window. So what I'm thinking about is okay, I'm having this club work from the inside and I'm going to draw it, but I need the ball to be going, my window needs to be a little bit right of the target, right? Because I want the ball to start to the right of the target and curve back to the left, right? So when I'm getting in here, I'm seeing, okay, here's my target, here's, in line with my target, right? And I'm going to see this ball going through a window that's right of my target. And sometimes I get it left of the window. That's kind of my main issue. And a lot of times that's just for me getting a little bit lazy with my legs, not continuing to turn through the shot, standing up out of it, rolling my hands a little bit too much, getting the face too closed, right? That's usually what happens. A lot of times it happens later in rounds when I start to get lazy, and my conditioning just isn't near as good as it used to be when I was in college or when I was a lot younger. So a lot of times things just kind of taper off, and I have to be more aware of it, right? I need, sometimes I'm just not that aware of it because I don't really care that much because I don't really play competitively anymore. But if I am in a competitive environment, I'm definitely more locked into what I'm doing and making sure, okay, I got to make sure I'm getting it to come out of this window. So that's really kind of the main thing for me is just getting the ball to come out of the right window, getting too lazy, throwing the hands through. Because you got to think about it. If our body stalls, right? If we stall the rotation of our body, the hands are going to flip through, right? So you can imagine this is like if I'm rotating my arm like this, right? And then I just stop my arm, what does the club do? The club's going to flip forward. When the club flips, it closes the face. So if I'm coming through and my body kind of stalls, then my hands kind of flip through, right? Then that's going to get the face too close. So I really need to, in order to get it to come out at the right window, I need to focus on keeping my body moving. So that way my hands stay in front and I don't get the face too close and it comes out the right window. That's what I'm thinking about. So John G says, you recommend, or you commented about extending towards the target in the downswing after the squat move. How does the spine angle increase? Stable fluid spine, of course, from setup to impact if you do not extend away from the target. Well, the extension is what gets the spine angle to move away, right? So if I'm here, if I didn't extend my hips, well, look what my spine angle would be, right? My spine angle would be straight up and down, right? If I'm coming down and then I extend my hips, right? I extend my hips forward as I'm rotating my body, right? So I'm coming in, I'm extending my hips. That's what gets my spine angle. Now my spine angle is angled away. So that extension is what gets the spine angled away. If I don't extend the hips, then I'll actually be too vertical usually. And you'll tend to come over the top and you won't be very fast. The extension allows you to keep rotating through the ball. But you have to get the bend first. All right, so if I go here, then that kind of stalls my rotation if I just start extending too early. So that's why it's important to bend and then extend up out of it toward the golf ball. That's what's going to help you to get your spine angle more angled away. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, we got not quite 15 minutes left here. And just a heads up, we got Hurricane Ian coming through. I'm in the Orlando area. So the worst of it's going to be starting here in a few hours from what I understand. And then, tomorrow, most of tomorrow. So I imagine there's a good chance we won't have office hours tomorrow. So just a heads up. I believe you skipped Mark N's question. Oh, okay. Let me see here. I didn't mean to. Oh, yeah, I may have. I think I might have. All right. So Mark N says, Q, like your video and drills to stay in posture and avoid early extension. Can you explain weight transfer specifically over each hip socket and timing of weight transfer? Thanks. Yeah. So basically, in the start of the swing, we want to be pretty balanced. We want to be pretty balanced with our weight. You can have a little bit more here or the other. When they tested tour players, they actually found that they had just a little bit more weight on their lead side to start. And that's really to do a counter move. So that way they can transfer it to their trail leg to start the swing. So, but you can set up either or. You can set up with, if you're more comfortable with having it there and then kind of keeping it there to start, or if you're more comfortable being here and then transferring it there to start, or if you're more comfortable just being pretty balanced and then transferring some to the trail foot, all of those can work. That was just an average, right? So 55, 45, that was just an average. There's definitely tour players that started with more weight here and more weight over here and vice versa. So really what it comes down to is all tour players shifted pressure into the trail side almost immediately to start the backswing, right? So that's really what it comes down to is I'm going to be here, be pretty balanced, or I can be a little bit more here or the other. And then I'm going to shift pressure into my trail leg. And that's actually going to max out around in this area. This is the most pressure as I'm going to have into my trail foot is at this point in the backswing, right? So I'm going to be here. And then this is the most pressure I'm going to have about halfway back. So my hands, somewhere around, rib level, somewhere around in that area. That's typically where we're going to see, that's where it's maximizing out. And the amount would be somewhere in the 75 to 80% area. If you're trying to swing with more power and you're trying to transfer more pressure, like you would with maybe a driver, when they look at long drive guys, it can be 90, 95% at that point in the swing, right? But when we're looking at just like a typical within control, precision kind of swing, you're going to see it's going to be about 75, 80% maxing out around in this area. Now, as I continue to the top of the swing, my pressure is actually going to start shifting to my lead side, right? So I might be 75, 80% here, but then as I go a little bit farther, I might be 70, 75%. and I go a little bit farther, I might be 65, 70%, right? And then as I get up to the top, it's very gradual, right? So it starts to shift very, very slowly in the beginning. Then as we get up to the top, I'm essentially recentered. I'm back to 50-50. So I'm here, 75-80. I'm going to gradually work here, and then it's going to work more. It's going to be much faster shift to the lead side, about 50-50 at the top. And then that's going to continue to increase as I come down all the way to impact. Now, for players that are going for maximum power, when we look at long drive players, that's actually maxing out around right here because they pushed so much into, they put so much vertical force in the ground that a lot of times you won't, their foot will actually start to unweight because they're kind of jumping out of the way. You'll see some players, they'll get here and then the foot kind of moves out of the way like that. We see a lot of players doing that, but for a standard kind of shot, again, precision, just an iron shot, trying to be the most consistent with it, you're going to see that gradually increase as we get to the golf ball. And we're going to be about 75-80% lead side at the golf ball. And then as we come around to the full finish, it increases some more because you're basically just posting up on your lead side. The only thing that's putting pressure into your trail foot is basically just the weight of the foot, right? So, essentially you want to get here and almost be like where you can be on your tippy toes, right? So that's basically the weight transfer. So halfway back, that's as far to my right as I'm going to be. I'm going to recenter to the top. If I'm going for long drive, I'm going to be maxing it out right here and basically having a vertical move, right, that gets me off the ground and with less pressure. But if I'm just taking a normal swing, which most of us are, you're going to see that gradually increase to 75-80% at impact. And then it's going to increase into the full finish because you're just posting up on the lead leg. All right. Sorry about missing that, Mark, but we'll keep going. All right, so Kim says, it seems that the club head rotates around the hosel at impact instead of letting the lead arm continue towards the target. Is that the correct way to visualize club head release? Let me read that again. It seems that the club head rotates around the hosel at impact of letting the lead arm, instead of letting the lead arm continue towards the target. No, I mean, there definitely is some rate of closure of the club face, and that will be around, the shaft or the hosel of the club. But I wouldn't say that that's what's releasing the club. When we're talking about the release of the club, and I know this can be really confusing because there are a lot of instructors that talk about the release. When here at Top Speed Golf, when we're talking about the release of the club, we are talking about the straight line release, and we're talking about where this club splits the forearms, right? So when I'm coming through, I'm seeing this club split my forearms here. It's bisecting my forearms. And we want to see that roughly about 45 degrees out in front. When we measured all the tour players, it was, the average was around 41 degrees. The range, an acceptable range, I would say would be between around 28 and 55, right? So that's what we found when we looked at that. So yeah, that's what we're talking about in the release. Is there some rotation around, some closing of the face, rotation around there? Absolutely. But we're also seeing the arms and everything moving through to help release the club. The wrists are releasing the club. The arms, the chest, the whole body rotating through is releasing the club. So not sure. I hope that kind of answers your question, but I'm not sure where you were going with that for sure. All right. So John G says, in the takeaway, does your hand path move in a straight line away from the ball, slightly inside or slightly outside? It's going to be slightly inside as it moves around your body, right? We don't want to move our hands out away from us. Our hands are going to kind of move around our body as we're turning, right? So it's going to be slightly inside. That's not to say that you can't have it move kind of, more straight back. There are some players that kind of bring it more straight back, right? But generally, you're going to see it's going to be moving around your body, right? Which means it's going to go a little bit inside, right? All right, so Dan C says, what putting warm-up routine do you recommend when playing a new course, especially when they're quite a bit faster than your home course? Seems like it takes at least a half a round to adjust. What do the pros do? So basically, what I do to start out is I'll try to find like a dead straight 5 to 6 foot putt, and I'll just kind of see if I'm hitting straight or not. That doesn't really have much to do with speed, but you can get a general feel for speed on short putts. If you hit one and you ram it in, the first one you might go, whoa, these are a little bit faster, right? So, but I just like to find that so that way I can see, okay, what's dead straight? Am I seeing what straight is? And then just trying to get a feel for the stroke right away. So that would be what I would do starting out. Handful, 10, 20 putts from there, getting a good feel for that. And then what I like to do is I like to do a 3-ball drill. And what I'll do is I'll just find like a random hole. I'll start out at about 8 feet. And what I'll do is I'll try to hit one with perfect speed to where if it rolled by the hole, it would only roll by the hole, a foot or two. I'll try to do one where I try to die it in the hole, where that would maybe roll by the hole, a few inches to a foot. And then I'll do one where I try to ram it in, where that would roll by, 2 or 3 feet or 4 feet or something like that, but would still be able to go in. So what that does, that will help you to get a feel for how much putts are breaking and how much how much speed they have. Because the more speed they have, the more they're going to break, right? So just going around, starting out with a shorter putt, then going a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. That can help to do that. So I'll do that. I'll do a few of those, and you just kind of make adjustments. If you're trying to die it in and you blow it way by, like it's like, whoa, okay, so this is a little bit faster. So I'm just being aware, like, okay, I need to play a little bit more break, and I need to, hit it a little bit softer. So you're making adjustments as you're going along. So you maybe do one at 8 feet, do one at 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet. And then after that, I would just do some straight up lag putting where I'll hit a couple putts from 20 feet. And I'm just worried about speed, the most important thing. I'll hit a few putts to kind of get a feel for 20. Then I'll go to 25, try to get a feel for that. Then go to 30, try to get a feel for that. And really just kind of focus on the speed. That to me, that's a good way to go about it. So first, find the straight putt, try to hit some dead straight ones, get a feel for the stroke. Then 3-ball drill, where you die it in perfect speed, then ram it in. That's going to help you get a feel for the speed. Start with shorter ones, 8 feet, then work all the way up to to 15 to 20 feet, and then I just do some straight up lag putts where you're just trying to find. You're just focused on the speed, and obviously direct. You want it to move somewhat directionally, but you're not so worried about, okay, I got to get this on the perfect line. It's more, I have the speed's the most important thing. You're way more likely to mess up on the speed than you are. So for example, you're way more likely to leave a putt like a 30-foot, 5 feet, 30-foot putt 5 feet short than you are to miss it 5 feet wide, right? Because your speed control is more important with those, right? So that's what I'd be trying to do. Just try to get that in a 3-foot circle around the hole. So we got one more question here from John G. Says, in my driver full swing, my trail right foot moves outwards toward the ball. Looks like an unbalanced finish. Any drills to stop my trail foot from moving outward in the follow through? It would just depend on why that's happening or if it's even an issue. It may not even be an issue. So that's what we have to be worried about, folks, is that just because your right foot does something that's maybe a little bit different than someone else doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong. If you look at Scottie Scheffler's foot moves way different than anybody else basically on tour, right? Number one player in the world, right? So you have to be careful just looking at something that looks a little bit different about your swing and thinking that that's a swing fault right away. You have to think, okay, well, what is the ball flight contact issue that is going to be fixed by changing the way that my foot works? If you can't put a nail on that, then it's really not worth working on, right? So I don't really have an answer for you because I don't know if it's an issue, and I also don't know what the cause of the issue is. If it's early extension, meaning your hips are kind of flying forward, and that's what's happening, right? Then probably working on the 20-minute shallowing fix would help, because most people early extend because they're coming down steep. I think that's about the best answer I can give you without seeing your swing and knowing exactly what's going on, or knowing if it's even an issue or not, right? So I would just try to think about it in that sense. All right, thanks everybody. DNC says stay safe. Yes, we'll try to stay safe here. Appreciate that. Everybody, just a heads up. Like I said, we may not have office hours tomorrow because it's supposed to be the worst of it tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll have power and everything, but no guarantees. So just heads up. My guess is we probably will not have office hours tomorrow. So anyway, anybody who's in the area, please be safe and be careful, and have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time.